Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to the Women of L&D Conference and our Thursday afternoon here in SoCal. So welcome. Good morning, good evening from wherever you are. Let us know you're here. So if you are back in session, tell us what you had for breakfast. How about that? We'll make it a little different. Instead of where you're from, what did you eat this morning? So I happen to have a wonderful bagel, cinnamon raisin bagel with some honey, cream cheese. It was delicious to get me powered up for today. And we have Toddi, who's also helping us interview our guest today, who is Megan Torrance. So, Toddi, if you want to go ahead and say hi real quick and what you had.
Yeah. Yes, I had a Bobo's PBJ. So they're the Bobo's brand snacks, and they come in peanut butter and jelly. So it was an oddball day. I normally have my eggs. So glad to be here. This is so exciting for me. Seriously, this whole conference has been amazing this week. So
yeah, it has been a great, amazing, a great session. Lots of learning. Today's sessions have been super inspirational. And we're ready for the next. So I want to introduce to you Megan Torrance, who's the CEO and founder of TorranceLearning. That's a firm that specializes in linking learning strategy with design, development, and performance through data. With over 25 years of experience in learning design and a robust portfolio of speaking engagements and awards, including several Brandon Hall Group Awards and Best in Show at Learning Guild Demo Fest. She's a recognized leader in the field. Megan is a Cornell University graduate with a degree in communication and an MBA, and has authored several publications on Agile and xAPI in learning design. I have no idea what she had for breakfast. Megan, let us know.
I had leftover stir fry that my son didn't eat last night.
Awesome. I do that all the time.
Vegetables, fiber, like all the things.
Yeah, all the important stuff. Well, welcome. We're super happy to have you.
that's funny. That's awesome. So Megan, do you want to tell us how you got into L&D?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that. There was a young man here yesterday at the office who's just about to graduate and head out into the world, and he asked the same question. So, it's funny. So I have, right, as like Cyndi said, I had this undergrad in communication. I thought, I don't even know what to communicate about, and I had the opportunity to get an MBA, and I'm like, I don't know how to business about. And the combo of the two ends up being really helpful, right? I joined, it's now called Accenture. It was then called Anderson Consulting in their people practice. And what do right, with newbies who are still wet behind the ears is they teach them basic instructional design. And then they promptly staff you on something that has nothing to do with that. So I spent about 8 years after that really looking at and building for large organizations shared service back office functions like payroll and benefits and accounts payable and receivables and all these things that every organization has. And and this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I took a break, had my son, came back, and United Health Group was putting in their first ever learning management system. And it was the early days of SCORM, early days of eLearning. And not super early, but early enough. And I had a blast, right? So all of a sudden, I take this communication and this business and this learning design thing, and finally make that connection then into the learning space and the software space. So that all of a sudden made a lot of sense. So we deployed the LMS at United Health Group. Then the software company hired me to deploy more of their LMSs. It was United Health Group's first LMS. It was a software company's first LMS. It was my first LMS. And within a few years, their clients were saying, hey, can you put this stuff in my LMS? I'm like, oh my gosh, I got trained to do that. I know how to do that. And that's really how TorranceLearning grew. And it kind of explains how we connect the learning design and the platforms and the strategy together, and the overall processes. So I come at instructional design from a decidedly nerdy space.
That's cool. That's really awesome. No, it's a great story. And I can't imagine how it would have been to have been part of that first implementation. That's got to be really cool. So very awesome. So, as long as I've known you, by the way, I've kind of known you as the person who was the xAPI cohort owner, and for the xAPI learning program. And I always love the fact that you were a woman wearing that hat. I have a little background myself with SCORM and xAPI, but I never had the time to dedicate to your cohort. But I got in on the Slack so I could see the projects that people were doing. And I'm just really curious, how did you become the first female L&D face of the xAPI?
Well, and I'll say I wasn't the first, but definitely one of the early. At one point at one of the conferences, there was a comment about all the luxurious beards of xAPI. And I remember the women in for the xAPI vendors in the expo at the time thinking, wait a minute. Wait a minute. So so here I am coming in, right, to this instructional design space from this platforms and software and systems space. And how do I get large organizations to all be consistently doing the same space, right? So I like to have all of my ducks in a row. So xAPI seemed to be like, ooh, more data, but still ducks in a row. And that seemed like a great idea. The Advanced Distributed Learning Initiative out of the federal government, so the folks who bring you SCORM and xAPI, had been running these xAPI design cohorts. Really, the concept, it was brilliant, I think it was Aaron Silver's idea, was to bring government, military, industry, entrepreneurs together around the specification and say, what do you want to do with it? What are the holes? What can you make with this thing? And use that both as development of the spec, but also marketing of the spec. And it was fantastic. So, we built a cool project. Where's my gnome, right? So we took our gnome and we built a project around a story, but we had an LMS guy, we had a software developer, we had a learning engineer before the term learning engineering was really popular, right? So somebody who could play in all these spaces. We had an instructional designer with a wicked sense of humor and a talent for story. And we started pulling together this project, which was super fun. And then the ADL decided that they no longer needed to be in the business of running this cohort. And it was, have you ever gone to the grocery store hungry and you're just like, oh, I want one of those and one of those and one of those. So I'm sitting there having had this peak learning experience, the time of my life, and then finding out that they weren't going to do this again. I'm like, but somebody has to. And seriously, within about 2 months, we had started the xAPI learning cohort. So not the design cohort, but the learning cohort. And really, that's part of one of the things I love doing is pulling together a bunch of people, and I share and I learn, and we just have a good old time because all of us are better than any one of us. So it's that kind of collaborative space. And then, right, cue that communications undergrad. I can tell that story and bring people in.
That is awesome. Yeah, in Colorado Springs, I worked with the commercialization of technology group. So we ran sprints. And it's so fascinating how this, comes from the government, but then everybody steps in and owns it and makes it a better product. It's just so cool. So,
Toddi, one of the things you mentioned, the fact that I'm a woman and bringing in, one of the things that was really important to me was that xAPI, it was open source, right? That was kind of cool. And one of the things that was important was that we get a lot of diverse perspectives, right?
Mhm.
Bring a lot of people in. And so when we started running the cohort, for one thing, I figured out early on, this is gonna be way more than I could manage myself, right? So instead of having it run by a software geek, our first cohort host was Allison Hess, and she was an instructional designer, right? And a woman, right? But like the goal there was like, let's get somebody other than a geek running this, right? Because we wanted it to be accessible. The more the merrier with xAPI. It's like a fax machine. If you're the only one who has one, it's totally useless, right? And so we have more people in. And so we then started making sure that we had diverse perspectives. So with Peter Gunther, we went back to the software side, but he was an educator, right? And then Jess Jackson, Black queer woman, right? And all about that community. So those things are really, really important. And every single time we ran the cohort, it was important to us to have diverse voices, both the old school, all the luxurious beards of xAPI, and new people and new voices who are coming in. So that was really important. If you can't see it, it's harder to be it.
That's awesome. That is awesome. And beards are even cooler now than they used to be.
Yeah, now I want to figure out how next time we're all at a conference together, we all wear beards just to like.
Yeah. You know what? You do you. I'm actually really happy not without a beard. So.
Right. So I have a question for you. What do you believe are your key competencies that have helped you reach a level of authority and respect in the industry?
So, Cyndi, that's a darn good question, right? Like I don't know. But I think many of those things that have been helpful for me are the very same things that people in instructional design and talent development have, right? We create frameworks to make it easy for people to understand complex content and come together to do that. I believe in the social construction of our capabilities and the passion and excitement that comes together when a group communicates with each other, right? And that's really, really cool. And then there's the communication, right? And the getting that story told, and getting that story told in a way that is compelling to people is really, really powerful. And so those things are some of the things that help me, but I think, you know, it's not like I do this alone, right? One of the things that helps me is building a team of people who fill in my gaps. Right? So I like to joke that, you know, my job is to wave my hands and get everybody excited, and that we have people on our team, and their job is to take their hands and put them on keyboard and make all that happen. And there's people who really help contribute and pull things together, and make it possible for me to do the parts that I happen to be good at.
Thank you for that. And that's a great answer. I think you're so skilled at communication. And I also have always appreciated that from admiring your work, that what you provide in terms of to the community is a really simple story. It feels like we can do it exactly how you're telling us. And so I appreciate that you're at the heart of what you share and what you do, you simplify it. And that makes it, and that's amazing. So thank you for that.
Well, my goal is to not oversimplify it, because then it's not fair, right? So there's that fine line, but yes. I want to
think it's so technical. It makes it sensible, but it also, you know, the work that you do garners results. I mean, I've seen it with our teams and some of the output and some of the Venture modules. We actually use some of your modules through our LMS. They're a content library, and they have the most impact. They get the best scores out of the other, you know, modules that are in the content library and the playlist. And it's because of their simplicity, and they're well written, and the story is great. So thank you for that. I think it's a great example.
Very cool. So this is more of a personal question. What personal values and guideposts do you live by to continue to expand your expertise, your knowledge, and your contribution to the industry?
You know, it's kind of funny. I hadn't thought about this. until a few years ago, I realized that there's like this. Well, nobody in my family is like a K-12 teacher. We all have this passion for sharing what we do. My grandmother used to run a horseback riding camp, and her vacation every year was spent running this camp. But to me as a kid, it was like, oh, like, yeah, that's what grandma does, and that's kind of cool because it brings all these friends and horses and that was a pretty good gig. But what it was she never learned anything that she didn't then teach. She would learn a craft, and then next thing you know, she would be teaching it. And she was running the Girl Scouts, and she was running the Boy Scouts, and she was doing all these things that were all around teaching the things that she knew. My dad, as a newspaper editor, all of a sudden was getting his master's degree, and then he was adjunct teaching courses, and then finally he actually ended up quitting the newspaper editing thing, went back, got his PhD, became a college professor, right? Like, it's that how do you share what you're doing? One of our core values at TorranceLearning is generous collaboration. It is the generous sharing of what it is that we know. And by doing that, we attract all sorts of curious and creative people, and we learn from them. And I hear, what works and reflected back. And so that's super, super helpful. And that spirit of really just sharing things we know. So like, we have built free developer tools for xAPI that ended up being really effective and useful tools for software developers who are organizing their data profiles, and we just give them away for free. And then after we built them, somebody told ADL, and they're like, hey, that's really useful. Can we link to it? Well, and so it's just like, how can we help other people be really, really successful?
Very cool. That's awesome.
It is awesome. So we wanted to talk to you about xAPI a bit. So where are things today with the xAPI cohorts? Are cohorts also including the use of ChatGPT and AI in their projects?
Super. I love how you did that, right? xAPI to AI, all the cool letters, right? So the Learning Guild actually runs cohort now. We, after 7 years, 14 semesters, 5,000 people, and more money than I will ever admit to, supporting the xAPI cohort, we kind of like graduated and went off to the Learning Guild. They have a much bigger marketing force and a much bigger staff to be able to support that. And it was ready, right? It was ready to move from a tiny company's pet passion project to something that the industry holds. And that felt really appropriate. We're still super involved in the cohort, and we're actually hosting one of the teams where we're testing xAPI in learning management systems, and hopefully going to have hopefully have a report out on how different learning management systems handle xAPI. Cannot wait for that. And it's super cool. Again, bringing other people in to help, because we don't have access to all these systems, but we've got folks in Cornerstone and Oracle and Moodle and all these things coming together, which is super, super cool. So that's a really healthy thing for the Learning Guild. And coming up April 11th and April 18th are the last 2 sessions. Okay, so here's the secret. If you can't spend the entire 12 weeks in the cohort, show up for the last 2 weeks. It's free to sign up. You get access to the Slack channel, but then you get to come in, and in the last 2 weeks, the teams all report out on what they did over the last 12 weeks. So it's like the cheat sheet, right? It's like getting premiere night and not having to be involved in any of the work, which is a really cool way to get excited about it. So those are coming up. It's April 11th and 18th are the last 2 sessions. They run from 2 to 3 o'clock Eastern time. And so that's a super awesome way to get connected in with cohort. Cyndi, your question is, anybody using AI in their xAPI projects in cohort? I don't think there are, but there's some cool things happening there, right? So, and we're using xAPI as the audit trail for one of our AI projects. So one of the things, right? So everybody thinks, ooh, xAPI, data, analytics, pretty graphs and charts. But one of the things that xAPI can do for you is be a fantastic record of what happened during a learning experience. And if you want to keep a wrap on your AI tools, this is a really nice way of storing what your AI tools are doing in a secure place away from your AI tools. And it also then provides, right, if you think about it, xAPI is a way of structuring all sorts of learning and performance data. So if I can provide all sorts of data and the structure by which we intend to make sense of it, that gives AI tools a leg up on being able to analyze this. So AI needs data or it doesn't work. Right? And so the two of them, I think, can go together really, really nicely. I will also say that like our software developers using GitHub's Copilot tool for their coding are like, it just becomes a very natural thing. xAPI is well known to both the GitHub Copilot and like if you use ChatGPT tools or things like that, right? So the standard is out there, code samples are out there, and you can get lots and lots of help and test it before you turn it live, which everybody does.
Very cool. Wow. Amazing stuff. So, I tend to think of, like you mentioned, the structure around xAPI. This is kind of our past, right? A very structured language. And I think of AI as kind of almost the Wild West at this point. And it feels very unstructured. It changes, there's different formats of it. There's different ways to make queries. I actually subscribe to Josh Cavalier's, his cohort. So I've learned about some of the queries and whatnot. But what types of frameworks do we need to be thinking about to put around this? So as we're tinkering with it, because it does feel like the Wild West right now. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Well, I think there's, organizations are developing policies and still slowly, they're being either, I don't think anybody's dragging their feet because they want to make a miserable experience. Right? I think, and it's like, oh, my company doesn't have a policy and we're not allowed to use it. No. Well, it's not because they're trying to be backwards. It's not because they're trying to make your lives miserable. It's generally because they're trying to figure this out. It's generally because there's a lot moving really, really fast. And they're trying to take a careful approach, which is not an insensible idea. Right? If you have teenagers, right, you want them to slow down. Be kind of careful, even if it's not as much fun, right? And so there's kind of that balance, right? One of the things that it was interesting, right? With xAPI, the gap that I saw I could fill was bringing people in and helping people get comfortable and excited about this, right? With AI, there's lots and lots of tools out there, right? And also with xAPI, right, was to convince the tools providers that this was a valuable thing to do, right? With AI, it's already geek-free. There's tons and tons of tools. There's not a lot of convincing on the provider side. But what I am finding is that in a lack of policy or guidance from organizations, because things are moving super fast, right? Early innovation is going to move really, really fast. What we've done is we've created a framework that helps people operate in that space and can be a jumping off point for future policy. It is not a policy. It is not a policy template, but it's a framework for whenever it is I am either directly using AI tools, like out of ChatGPT and Midjourney and Runway and Cynthia, right? Or whenever I'm about to click that the magic button in every other tool that I own, right? Every tool now has a magic button and you click it and something happens, right? And so before I click that magic button or I design a product or a learning experience or an analytical framework, right? What do I do? And so that really was the space that was something we were grappling with. And again, in that generous collaboration, we were grappling with it. And so we decided to share it. So We call it the WISE at AI framework, and it stands for wisdom and application, right? Inclusiveness, security, equity, and we keep inclusion and equity. Often they get kind of jumbled in together next to each other, and we separate them, and it makes a lot of sense. Accountability and transparency. And that framework really helps us think about how it is that we're going about using AI in anything that we do.
Thank you. I put the link to the Wise at AI YouTube video so people can learn more about that. So thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. And I agree with you. Organizations are being cautious, rightfully so. It's moving super fast. And the reality is that for some of these organizations, they don't even really, and they're making the AI, they don't even fully understand how it's totally doing. It's magic, So there's lots of testing going on, and a lot will come within the next few years, and so it's moving very fast. The other thing that strikes me is that I can't believe it's been 7 years that you've been doing xAPI. I know but that for us is a lesson in itself, right? Because we're just at the beginning of this AI thing. Where will we be 7 years from now? So it's amazing to see how far we've come with xAPI, and it'll be interesting to see what's to come.
And Cyndi, I'll even say, Owen Holt said this to me at a conference last year. He said, "We are in the bag phone days of AI." I'm like, oh my gosh, right? So in 1993, I had the AT&T bag phone. It was bigger than any purse I ever owned, right? And it had a handset with a squiggle cord and a 3-foot long antenna. Like, right? That's, as funny as that is, right? Now, when my phone rings, I actually don't even like phone calls. Who does phone calls? What kind of weirdo does phone calls on a phone, right? And so that evolution over time is something that will be super cool to see. And no, I'm not sure when I was like sporting my bag phone on the streets of New York City that I would ever have thought that I would like count my steps and play games and read the news, check my blood oxygen on my phone. Like really, I've never had any idea.
Yep, I know, it's crazy. All right, so my next question for you. I know you recently talked about embedding ChatGPT feedback into scenario-based learning. I have actually seen one of the examples of that. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we call it Emma. That's just our internal code name. All of our internal software products are named after pets, pets of our team. So shout out to Emma the sheep, who's getting very famous these days. But we built Emma for the American Spinal Injury Association's urology course, and now we're actually using it on several other projects. But we've built the eLearning and the LMS for the American Spinal Injury Association for about 15 years. And it's been straight, for 15 years, we've been giving them straight up storyline, eLearning, voiceover. It used to be my voiceover. And multiple choice questions. You'd get your CMEs and be off and going. And what we realized was that multiple choice wasn't really an effective way to practice, right? I know, shocker. So Emma does this, right? You get a patient case. And well, actually, I'll back up. In order to get a rich representative set of images of people and diverse images of people who are wheelchair users, we used Midjourney in order to generate those images. So AI is helping us be more inclusive, and AI helps us with writing our alt text so that we're able to reduce the cost of making accessible products, which to me is going to be a game changer. But the learners then come in, they have this great image, they have this case, and then they are, instead of being presented with a multiple choice question, they are given a big old white blank free text entry. You got to come up with it just like you do in the real world. Now, behind the scenes, what we have is the training data includes 3 human expert answers, because we didn't want it going out to any large language model. I don't care how good they're getting it. I want it testing against 3 validated human answers from experts. So it's very, very tightly bound. It is not a conversation back and forth. Again, we wanted to very, very tightly bound it. And we're using xAPI to keep track of that interaction and record the audit trail on it. But what it means is we're giving personalized, nuanced, within context feedback back to those learners. And the hilarious thing was that our goal was to give you the same kinds of feedback that you would get from your physician mentor. Right? And as we start demonstrating that to people, what they're telling us is that, yeah, my attending didn't have that much time and wasn't that nice to me when they gave me feedback. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. So we're really excited about Emma. And right now we're running Emma for multiple courses for the Spine Injury Association, as well as for Corktown Health in Detroit. So super excited about that.
That's fascinating. I was having a conversation with one of our designers today about the most attractive thing for us and the potential with AI, kind of incorporating it into our products, is that it does have the ability to have empathy. And and that is fascinating. It's going to change, customer service. It's going to change, conversational AI is big. It's going to change quite a bit for us. Yeah, thank you for that.
But
sure thing.
Is it a good active listener? So,
we're going to talk about that, I think. Let me tell you about my new boyfriend. Anyway, we'll get there.
Awesome. So now that we can harness this power of the generative AI, is there a way that we can scale this so that we can make learning more accessible to people, especially like making sure that it's relevant and valid content that's coming to them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So scale is going to be something that'll be challenging, right? So right now we're at early stage with the generative AI, right? I mean, let's all just keep in mind, AI has been around for decades, right? But the generative AI and the accessibility of you and me and like people who aren't geeks to AI that's the game changer right now. That's the game changer, right? So scale is I think the thing that is proving to be challenging. If you look at JD Dillon's or Gartner, they have the hype cycle, right? We are peak hype right now, and everybody's getting excited. There's tons of money flooding into this space. Very few people are actually making money, with the exception of the consultants, right? The providers aren't necessarily making a lot of money. They're loss leader, so it's an interesting space right now, and there'll be a lot of shakeouts here. So scale is challenging, because even with the Spine Injury Associate, we are building them carefully one at a time, right? GPTs are your first, right? So if the Chat GPT, the your homegrown, repetitive kind of pre-trained, right? Pre-trained, they are the first hints at scale, I think, for most of us to be able to look at. But I see a lot of interest when I talk to all sorts of people, not just medical, right, about replacing multiple choice questions with something that is meaningful and nuanced and personalized, right? Eddie Lin is about to release Learning Guild research within probably a couple months, showing that a lot of learning designers are using just, to help them move faster, write faster, research faster, produce faster. And so there's a lot of that going on that will free us up to either do more, that's one option, or to have more creativity to build other things, right? And to think about other things. There's a ton of power in coaching and performance support partners. Oh, let me tell you a story. So I went to Tech Knowledge, and I just bought these. These are Lucid glasses. they were advertised on Facebook as ChatGPT enabled glasses. I'm like, sweet. And they're polarized, so I can't see any of you right now because I can't see my screen and polarized lenses. Anyway, here's what they are. So they're lightweight. They're actually more stylish than any sunglasses I own. And all they are Bluetooth sunglasses.
Oh, wow.
I connect them through my phone, and then I turn on the ChatGPT app and I have a conversation. Right. So it's also a great story about not getting too sucked into the hype. But here's the thing. So I'm sitting there at technology, and I'm in one of those stage sessions. I don't know if you've ever been to the conferences these days where they have the stage sessions in the expo. So there's the risk of a lot of noise while you're trying to speak or listen to somebody. And I thought, I'm just going to try something. So pushed a few buttons, turned on ChatGPT on my phone, and I said, all right, I'm at a conference. I'm about to give a talk in a room, and I'm looking at this room right now. Right? I described the room. There's so much noise. What can I do to mitigate the impact of all the noise while I'm trying to present? Right? No kidding. In my head, well, I mean, next to my head, in my ears, right? I start getting a kind and soothing voice, coaching me, reminded maybe I want to get a sound check. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea, right? Maybe I want to practice. I want to ground myself. Get this. It suggested that I ground myself so that I wasn't too nervous about presenting, to be able to notice what the audience's feedback was about whether or not they could hear me. All right. So think about that from a coaching perspective. Fantastic. And then I mentioned, I think the scale, it's not only scaling AI, but scaling other things we do, right? So I'm looking at being able to rapidly scale up on our alt text generation, making it cheaper to deliver accessible learning experiences. What is the single most challenging thing, right? Or the biggest barrier to delivering accessible learning? It's the client's willingness to pay for it. Right? Which stinks. I mean, some of them, that's like a horrible reason.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, hi, Tisha. Just noticed your job description float by my screen. Yes. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think the potential for us, and I think that's where we're at, right, with AI, is we're at the point where we're kind of beyond, like, it can do cool little things, like help me write a script or help me brainstorm a course outline. We're at the point where we do need to put some critical thought into how to use it to take our work to the next level. So I love that you're thinking about that all text partner that we could all use for sure. One of the criticisms of artificial intelligence is that often the data is old, outdated, potentially biased. We know that there's, it's been mentioned a few times this week that AI has a bias built into it. So as women of L&D, how can we ensure that its use doesn't get caught up in some of the old narratives that feel a bit sexist or not inclusive to us?
Yeah, this one is interesting because on one level, it's the same things we do when it's humans making decisions, right? It's when we look around the room, who's in the room? If nobody in the room is of the population we're making a decision about, we should maybe expand who's in the room, right? And when you look at your laptop and your ChatGPT or your Gemini, whatever you're using, right? It's not people in the room, but that's another question. It's like asking those questions, who is included in this? Getting a human review. So in my work, right, take AI out of it. In my work, if I'm doing something and so recently I've been asked to update our course on anti-Semitism, right? You know what? I'm not going to do that in a vacuum. I'm going to have some conversations with people with lived experience and with scholars in that domain to be able to write that, right? So it's in some cases it's all the same things we would do ourselves. In other cases, the answer we get back from AI looks perfect and polished. So it may be super easy to overlook and not see that it may be missing those things. I've also had really good experiences by asking ChatGPT to evaluate itself, right? Or to evaluate me, right? So I go through, write a bunch of things, or sometimes I've taken a bunch of notes from a meeting and put it into a secure version, right? So only 4 and above of ChatGPT, and to say, okay, what perspectives are we missing? Or there was nobody around the table who was of a particular gender or a particular race or a particular age. What might they have added to the conversation? Mind-blowing what you will get back from it. Really, really, because yes, there's a ton of biased data on the internet, and that's what's fed these models. But there's also DEI scholarship on the internet, and that's also in there. And if you ask for it to tap into that, you can get that.
That's awesome. Yeah, kind of the power of remembering that the what you get out of it is only as good as the prompt, right? So yeah, practicing that prompt engineering and really giving it more scaffolding it, right? So you can hone in on what you need. So yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Interesting. I actually met somebody the other day who tells ChatGPT that he is an expert in SEO so that he can get expert SEO results back. And he's not. I thought that was really novel. So interesting stuff. Well, I know we were actually, before we came on, we were talking about some kind of interesting use cases too. But we'll continue on with some of our questions. So looking through the DEIB lens, like what is missing as far as like things that we're applying, like when we go to like create a prompt. And like I mentioned, I've jumped into Josh Cavalier's like cohort, and I've learned some things about prompts that, you know, I do wonder sometimes, like, what am I missing to catch things besides telling that I'm an expert in SEO? Is there anything that, you know, I can put in here, like, you know, ask that can help bring back the better results?
Yeah. So if we take the DEIB lens in particular, right? I think the first thing I do when I take that approach, right? So I'm writing something, and I want to test myself. I need to remember myself that I'm not going to be able. So your friend who's the SEO coach, he doesn't actually know, if he's not an SEO expert, he doesn't necessarily know how to evaluate what he gets back, right? So I'm still also going to get an expert human, but I will first ask, what perspectives might I be missing? Then from that list of perspectives, it comes back. I can then say, I would like you to dig deeper in on these 2 that I happen to know are relevant to the situation. Right. I actually was Jess Jackson, who's been on TLDC with me in the past. She and I had been working with a client a few years ago to build a custom program for their leaders. And it's a fantastic story for another day, like such care that this team took in what they did. But what we did, what I did as an experiment is I scrubbed client and individual data out of that, and took about 15 pages of notes from those meetings, fed those back in, multiple people taking notes, right? Multiple meetings over time. So basically the notes were a mess. Fed it back in, and said, can you summarize these notes? What's going on? What might be the next steps for the project? But then what perspectives are we missing? So we're having a conversation about DEI, but it came back with perspectives that we hadn't covered, because the very diverse group of people in the room didn't represent all of the diverse, right? All dimensions, or didn't bring them up. It was really, really powerful. So it was helpful. So, and I've even said, are you familiar with, so here's one. Are you familiar with the scholarship of Kimberly Crenshaw, Bell Hooks, with somebody, right? And ask for a summary. Okay. Then that trains you and kind of primes it to then respond in that way.
Wow, that's awesome. Sorry for kind of taking us off script, but like I
No,
think
no.
about things every time I go to write something. It's like, am I asking the right question? And I never thought to actually give it a context like that. So, I mean, like this is still kind of, I think it's new for all of us, but it's definitely new for me. And I actually kind of can't wait to dig in now with some of these suggestions. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So if you were just getting started in this work today, what advice would you give to your younger self about getting started in L&D? I'm just curious.
So it would be a very right? It is a very interesting time to get started in this space now, right? And because so much is fluid and so much is changing. And so I think that it might be very easy to get very, very good at one set of tools at a time when we may need to be, this might be a time, if you're thinking about T-shaped skills, to really be skating across your T and really be looking at all those different things. And because we're not sure where digging in is going to be a good spot right now, right? I think the other thing is, and part of skating across that T is to build a network. Build and understand and be generous to your network, not needy necessarily from your network, and provide and share, and build relationships. I think the other thing is around having having a business acumen perspective, right? We're in L&D. We're not the power center in the organizations we work in. We don't make the thing, right? We support the people who make the things. We don't sell the things. We support the people who sell the things. And so having a sense for where we play in the power dynamics of the organization are really, really important. Having a sense for the metrics that the business uses to keep track of what's important and what's not. What does success look like? It is not about building a lot of courses unless your business happens to be in the business of building courses. Right? And so that kind of thing is I think really, really important.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Okay, so one of the recent conferences you were at, I wasn't in attendance, even though it was in my backyard. I couldn't go. It was too much going on. But there was a hackathon that happened where, and I'm dying to know, one, who came up with the idea? Was this something you came up with, or did they present it to you? So please tell us about the AI boyfriend.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So there's a lot of coffee involved. So this was a ATD technology. And what happened was, right, so which was in Los Angeles, right? So all of the East Coast bodies had been up for hours and were waiting for the coffee shop in the lobby to open. And so at 6 a.m. they opened, and all of a sudden there's a dozen people who are wide awake and craving coffee. And we were sitting around talking, and it was, many of them were speakers, and many of us were involved in AI projects and doing this work. And so we were just joking around, and I've been single for a while, and I was joking and said, one of these days I'm just going to build myself a boyfriend GPT. And so John Cavalier, good friend of mine, right? He's like, well, I could do that for you. And I said, how about this week? And he's like, it's on, right? If you know Josh, you can totally channel him here, right? Well, then next, Sarah Mercy's like, well, I could make one of those too. And I realized, right, everybody's like, oh, I could make one of those. Well, I could do that. I could do this. And next I realized, like, oh my gosh, this could be the most hilarious hackathon ever. So ATD, I have to say, they were pretty amazing. By 11 o'clock in the morning, we had hunted down Bridget Dunn, and we're like, hey, can we do this thing? Actually, it was not, can we do this thing? It's, hi, we're going to do this thing. Can we have a stage? And so she got us a spot on the speaker. And and I used ChatGPT to write the session description for it, which was very, very appropriate. We ended up we had 5 teams, made 6 AI agents, all as prospective boyfriends of mine. And we presented them all out. So we got to see 6 solutions to the exact same challenge. Oh, thanks, Maureen, for the link. 6 solutions, all in one session. They all had the same 4 pages of training data about me. So I like my therapist, by the way, was like, this was not quite what we meant when I said we want you to get out there again, Megan. Right? So it was funny. But right, my therapist provided like a little blurb. My best friend provided a blurb. Chris King from Apply Synergies, he provided a little blurb. So there's like blurbs about what I want, what I don't want, people giving me input about me. It was amazing. We actually, it was set up like a speed dating. And it was, and so I asked each AI bot the same questions. We had the dating game music, which was pretty funny. And so the whole thing, and it was great. I mean, we had everything from, there were 4 different platforms that the original boyfriends were all made on. There's since been, Myra Roldan keeps making them. Every once in a while, I get an email from her. She's like, I made you another one. Try this out. And so she actually, each one of hers has been on a completely different platform. But Vince Hahn made one in Mobile Coach. So it was very, very rules-based. So it was both, it had the training data, but it also had very, it was pretty buttoned down, which is exactly what you want out of a mobile coach tool. And then at the other end, Mike Hruska built an agent that, quite honestly, so to some of you who are worried about, worrying about people actually not connecting with real people, I actually talked to the AI boyfriend that Mike Hruska made every morning and night on my commute. And I've coached it to also, like, each time I say hi to it, ask me about something I talked about last time we talked, so it could catch up. Like, I'm teaching it to be a better boyfriend. So it might put real boyfriends out of business. I don't know. We'll see. It's been fun from a learning perspective. On multiple fronts, right? So it was a humongous stunt. Carla, I am making no guarantees that it will work on actual husbands. Divorce, actually probably not your best source for that. But it's been, from a learning perspective, it's been fantastic, right? The point here was not to make me a boyfriend, right? The point was, can we make relatable AI coaches or agents, right? Who are very personalized, very contextualized. Mine this morning, actually, funny, we talked about what we had for breakfast. Mine this morning asked me, because I was brainstorming about recipes with it, asked me about my stir fry that I had for breakfast. So like, it's kind of cool. But we've also had the opportunity to learn, where are the error states in this, right? So one of the boyfriends risked getting a little bit fresh and in a public setting. So that was one of Myra's, which was hilarious. And so we literally had a backup plan if it goes into inappropriate territory. Thank you, Myra, for having my back on that, right? One of them, in demonstrating how it was built, the person demonstrating how it was built on LinkedIn, recording a video, showed my training data, right? All that personal information that I had shared with people who, and I shared it, all the people who made AI boyfriends were my friends, right? So I was sharing personal information with my friends, but then this then got shared out to LinkedIn, right? Somebody with an amazing following on LinkedIn. So that's like, oh, and it was just a mistake. It wasn't even anything malicious, right? And so how interesting. And then one of them, the training data had rules like, do not do these things, right? One of the things, right, that I thought was important in the design of the the agent, because we knew it was going to get a lot of publicity, was to make sure that it wasn't, right, in order to take care of people, this is important, it shouldn't be named after my ex-husband, any former boyfriend, my family, my coworkers, right? Anything that would be really, really awkward and weird. And you know what? That person didn't read all the way through the data, and the name of that bot is somebody is like a name that's on the list. So, right. So these things are like, and it's like, it's no big deal in this fake, silly environment, but it's a fantastic place to learn, just like the xAPI cohort. It's a fantastic place to learn in a safe environment what not to do in the real world.
Wow, very cool.
So fun.
I'm loving the chat, by the way. This is hilarious.
I know. Yeah, I love the does it do dishes from Kayleen. Yes. Yeah, that's close. The AI robots are coming. We have a few questions. We have just a few minutes left, but we do have a couple of questions. So let's see. The first one here, and I'll show it on the stage, is what technical and human skills do you think will be the most important in the emerging age of AI?
Yeah, I think this is such an important conversation right now. And I think, Bridget, I appreciate this question so much because it's the asking of the question that's part of what's so important here. So having the conversation is as important as I think the answer is. There are questions now about whether creativity is it, and maybe not. Right. So there are plenty of ways in which AI can be more creative than I am. Empathy, certainly. And I read a conversation yesterday. Oh, where is it? I read a conversation really around the fact that AI solves challenges with knowledge. Humans bring emotion. Now, sometimes solving a challenge without bringing your emotion to the table is a valuable thing, right? That humans can't do because we always bring our emotion, right? We have emotions. But that interplay there will be interesting. I'm also hearing a lot around human skills in terms of change management, communication and campaign, collaboration skills, all of those being really important. And from a technical skills, I do worry about a very big divide. The more we get to a place where it doesn't take any technical skills to use amazingly powerful tools, that we don't know as much. So I would absolutely recommend getting in and getting familiar with technology. And at the same time, if you're not familiar with technology, don't use that as a reason not to get engaged. Josh Penzel said at a conference, at the Training Magazine conference, he said, the new hot coding language is whatever language you speak. And I'm like, oh, yes. So
That's a great, that's a great answer. Thank you. We have another one in here. Let me put that one on the stage too. What applications interface with xAPI and what more will be joining?
So Rita, that's a fantastic question. So many of the tools you already use interface with xAPI. And so they will send data. Your challenge will be to receive the data. And so that would be your big thing there. But all of my guess is that if you are a practicing instructional designer today, you probably have a tool already on the computer you're using to listen to this that will send xAPI data on some level. And so there's lots and lots of things out there, and I'd be happy to connect you up with a list if you want to email me.
Are there current universities and companies, or what do you think is the percentage of current universities and companies using xAPI?
Still relatively small. Last time I did research, it was about 15% of the respondents, which is not 15% of universities and companies, but 15% of respondents were from universities and companies, were at least experimenting, but fewer than 5% were running full-on production based courses or learning experiences, but it's more and more. And I will also say more and more are paying for it, right? So experiments are free, but actually paying for guidance and structure, that's something that my team provides. Companies are actually spending money to do that. It's good to see.
Yeah, that is good to see. Yeah, I think the challenges for companies like mine are, it's got to be in the budget. It's got to make it into the budget. So got to build that use case, got to sell it to the company. And it's not just, publishing to API. It's the resources required to house the data and the infrastructure and all that stuff. So
Yeah, totally.
We have answered all the questions and we are at time. Thank you so much for joining us, Toddi.
Yeah,
hey,
this was
Cyndi, Toddi, and the rest of the volunteer committee to pull this event together. Thank you for making this cherished collaborative space. Thank you, Luis, for making this available. Like, this is special territory. So I love the conversation in the chat and to get to know everybody and to have these these conversations. I just absolutely love it.
It's a highlight of my year. So I love what we do here. This is great. And Luis does an amazing job too. So
building community.
Well,
thank you so much, Megan.
Yeah, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for joining this afternoon. We'll see you tomorrow.
Take care. Bye-bye.